Hi friends, I have a fun and informative video for you guys today. I'm going to be showing you a few of the tools, both the common ones and the uncommon ones that I have on my workbench that maybe you want to consider having on your workbench. Today's video I'm going to be using both my main camera and my GoPro camera so that you guys can have an up-close look at each of the individual tools while I explain a little bit about them. Before I get into that though, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. While you're at it, go ahead and click the bell icon so you're notified every time I upload a new video. Cue the intro. There are many different tools that you can get to make working on your models easier and more enjoyable. I have all of my tools pulled out of their storage area and spread out on my workbench. Normally, my workbench is much neater. Alright, one of the first components of any good workbench is a cutting mat. As you can see here, I've got just a simple craft cutting mat. It's two sides, so that as one side maybe gets soiled or some paint or other crud on it, you can always flip that over. So you want to have a cutting mat to protect the table surface that you might be working on, or the desk, or whatever, wherever it is you're doing your work there. And if you're using a lot of paint and you're prone to spilling some of that paint, you may even put a towel down under this or some plastic sheeting or something like that to avoid getting any paint stained on your table. So that's the cutting mat. You'll want to have one of those. Okay, the next item we have up on our workbench here is this foam cradle. This is so that you can place your models in it upside down and protect the fragile details while you work on the underside of the rolling stock that you're working on. So you'll want to have a foam cradle so that you can safely and securely handle your models while you're working on them. All right, these are a new item that I have only had for a few months. These are some for placing your locomotive on the track and keeping it up off of the track while you test or I guess break in the locomotives. By setting that here on the rail, it allows the electricity to come up here to these rollers. And then you place the locomotive on the rollers, and then you can connect your track power to your test track and allow the locomotive to run in place and not actually have to move anywhere. These will allow that locomotive to just run in place and get their wheels broke in. It's very good for testing out new motors, new gears, maybe momentum, or any kind of DCC programming. So those just fit right on the track there, and then you space them out so they will support the trucks, each side of the locomotive, the trucks on each side of the locomotive. So you want to maybe consider some of those. These are made by Bachmann. Bachmann makes those for HO scale. I do believe they make them in other scales as well, so that's something to consider. Up next we have our trusty Kadee coupler height gauge. It also just fits right down on our track there and measures the height of the coupler head as well as the trip pin clearance. So you'll want to have something like that so you can make sure that all of your couplers are the right height so they stay coupled, and the trip pins are not too low so they don't catch on objects on the track. Next up, I'm just going to go through these pretty quickly. We have our NMRA gauge. This gauge is going to allow us to check the compliance of our track gauge, make sure that's how it's supposed to be. Also, it allows us to check our wheel gauge, our clearance gauge on our switch frogs and switch points, and our flangeways. Also, tunnel clearance. It's just an all-around platform clearance. It's just all around a great tool to have at our workbench, so we can check the conformance of all of our things that we need to check there, track gauge and wheel gauge especially. All right, also along the lines of couplers is this Kadee trip pin plier, a pair of trip pin pliers. This is going to allow us to adjust the trip pin of couplers either up or down. By flipping the tool upside down allows you to adjust the trip pins down if they are too high, or up if they're too low. So you'll have that if you are working with HO scale couplers with a metal trip pin attachment. Moving along here, we have an assortment of different squares. We have a machinist square that has that thicker lip on it so it can overhang the edge of something. And so that's a machinist square that we can do that with. We also have some simple Zona stamped metal squares, both an L and a triangle. So those are handy if you're going to be scratch building a lot of, or kit bashing or anything like that, a lot of structures. So we've got some squares along that route. We have our scale ruler. This has multiple scales on it. Not only does it have HO scale, which is what I model, also does S scale, O scale, N scale, and has a standard ruler on one end, a metric ruler on this end, and some conversion tables on there. So that's also very good, and it acts as a straight edge if you're scratch building or kit bashing. All right, so next up we have these gluing jigs for gluing together the walls of kits, structures, and things like that. They're just magnetic, and so when you have two walls of a structure that you want to bring up together, you can snap that together so that it will hold. You normally have one at the top of the wall and one at the bottom of the wall, and that'll hold everything nice and square for you, while then you use your glue of choice to glue together the seams of the wall. So that's a good set to have. You can have that to hold the building together while the glue sets up as well. Speaking of glue, so we have several different varieties of glue that I like to keep in my toolbox here. Let's see if we can see all of these. We have our typical super glue, CA glue, crazy glue, whatever you want to call it. This particular brand is Loctite, just from a generic big box retailer. Also have Tesser's plastic cement. This is really good and it lasts quite a long while. Typically would have a longer, thinner spout on it. I had cut mine off because I was using a micro brush with this particular glue. We have two different kinds of plastic weld. We have our general purpose, which is good for gluing together different types of plastic material, ABS to styrene or something like that. And then we have our specific for gluing together styrene to styrene and ABS to ABS, so forth. Tacky glue is good for gluing together items that you want to have a thicker glue that absorbs some of the space between things, maybe speaker enclosures or things of that nature. Also for things that you just want to tack down but maybe not permanently, like decoders on top of motors or anything like that. And then lastly, there's some liquid tape, liquid electrical tape glue, and that's good for coating electrical connections that you otherwise couldn't get shrink tubing on. So that's also handy to have there. Along with the glue, we have, if we're going to be doing decaling, we have clear coat and dull coat lacquer spray. Whenever we get a new model, we maybe would spray it with some dull coat, take the initial plastic shine off of it. That alone gives it a little more realistic appearance. Also, if we are going to be doing some decal work, we might want to put some gloss coat on it first, so that we have a nice smooth glossy surface to adhere our decals to. Speaking of decals, we have Micro Set and Micro Sol from Microscale decals. These are used for the setting solution to set your decals on your model and help them get out all the little air bubbles and set down real smooth on your models. Also on my workbench, I keep some liquid masking tape for whenever I'm doing some painting work or some weathering work and I don't want to get weathering materials on my windows or headlight lenses. I put that little on there. It's easier than actually cutting masking tape. Speaking of masking tape, that's also a good thing to have on a workbench. Always just keep a roll of masking tape around for not only masking for painting, but also just for holding very tiny little parts while we might be painting them with an airbrush or something like that. And I also keep a little bit of clear nail polish, the nail hardener nail polish. If I need a clear coat of something, then I can paint some of that on there, and it acts as an insulator as well, so that's handy. Next up, I also keep around, of course I haven't opened this one yet, but I keep around some clear window cement. This dries clear whenever you apply it to some clear styrene for window glazing or anything like that in your buildings. So that's a pretty good adhesive for doing that kind of stuff with. If you're doing any kind of kit bashing or scratch building, you want to consider having some fast-acting, fast-drying body putty. This here is made by Squadron. I've had this particular tube for a long time. I haven't even taken it out of its packaging yet because I'm still on the first one. So I haven't really done much scratch building lately. Let's see, we've got some PTFE grease. That's the white grease, and then we also have some lubricating oil for fixing up our locomotives that maybe have some grinding gears or squeaky bearings. While we're working on our models, we also want to maybe consider having a simple kitchen scale. This way we can weigh our cars and make sure they conform with the NMRA standards. That will help them stay on the track much better and perform better. Okay, here I've got a plastic tub of all of my different files and sanding tools here. I use actually just simple cosmetic sanding sticks for doing some of the sanding work. A few different grits of polishing polishers and finishing sticks. A variety of different mini files. A couple of larger files for doing the bigger work. And then some sanding sticks as well. So sanding sticks are pretty handy for getting into those really small crevices that you need to do a little more sanding on. Okay, moving on down the line here, we're going to go through our different grippers and tweezers. We have a couple of different locking tweezers. So these are always closed, and then you use the finger pressure to open them like that. These are good for grabbing onto maybe a small item, and then it has its own pressure. You don't have to maintain the pressure yourself, so you're not getting tired if you're, say, maybe holding onto a figure that you're trying to paint. You can just hold that there while you work on that figure. So those are locking tweezers. A couple of different sizes and styles there. The straight nose, and then the one with the curved nose, the finer tip. And then some normal tweezers, just a variety of different small normal tweezers. A couple different shapes and heads there to grip just different things. These here look like tweezers. These are actually sprue cutters. They've got the tip, the sharper tip there, so whenever you're cutting away delicate parts from a sprue, from a building kit maybe, this allows you to get right down in there on that sprue, nip that part off the sprue. Once I have small parts, I have this small little gripper thing here. As I push the thumb down, springs out the grabber, and I can grab a hold of maybe a small piece that I want to pick up if it's fallen, or something that I want to hold, like say a figure if I'm trying to paint a little miniature figure person. Here we have a simple metal pick. It's got a very sharp tip on it. It's curved. Got one on both ends of this guy here, covered in these little plastic tubes to keep the tip nice and sharp and free of any damage, and obviously from poking ourselves, we don't want to do that. These are handy for just scribing lines if you want to scribe lines in your building kits. or just trying to position a very small part on a kit while the glue sets up. As we're working on kits, especially with different glues and paints, you want to consider having some disposable rubber plastic gloves, something like that. So that's good also to keep the finger oils off of our models as we're handling them. I keep a pair of just generic scissors for cutting sheets of decals or anything like that. Just simple scissors would be fine. Alright, moving on here, we've got a few different styles of pliers here. We've got some needle nose pliers with a bent nose, and then normal needle nose pliers with a normal nose. They're not very big, so I can, you know, smaller parts and stuff like that. I also do have a larger pair of adjustable pliers, so that if I have a stubborn bottle cap or something like that that doesn't want to come off, I can get that and open that or whatever I need. So there's that. Also some simple wire cutters for cutting DCC decoder wire or anything like that. Now here's a couple of Xeron cutters. These are flush cutters. This particular pair here is meant for cutting track sideways, you know, as you normally would with track cutters. And then this pair is meant for vertical cuts in the track for cutting it from up above going down. Okay, so I've got a couple of track cutters there. People tend to use these for cutting just about anything, and that's not a good idea. They're really designed for flush cutting, you know, soft metals like the nickel silver that's used in track. But any kind of excessive cutting on hard metals, they're going to end up dulling those blades quick, and then they'll be pretty well useless. Alright, next up we've got a set of razor knife, a hobby knife set. It's got a variety of different blades in there, 2 different sizes of handles. I don't know why, but they also included an odd shaped pair of tweezers and a flathead screwdriver. I'm not sure why, because I'm never going to use those. I just wanted the assorted blades to be able to work on my different models with. So I've got 2 different got that at my local big box retailer as well. So that was kind of handy to have something like that so close. A retractable razor utility knife. That's good to have. Might get a couple different sizes of those. One thing to consider is maybe some little spring clamps, some plastic spring clamps. That's also good for holding pieces of styrene together if you're scratch building a project or a bridge or something like that. You know, those can get down there, hold that together while the glue sets up. So have something like that. Also from my local big box retailer, we have a miniature set of screwdriver bits. Lots of different miniature sizes, very small, flathead, Phillips head, square bit, Torx, Allen, just a whole variety of different sizes of miniature bits, along with a little handle to use those with. They're in a nice little plastic container to keep them straight. Alright, so I keep around these are just magnetic squares that I got from Micromark, the tool company online. And so these are really handy for setting together building kits so that you can get them glued together. And then I went a step further and I got a generic cookie sheet from grocery store or wherever you want to get them from. And the cookie sheet is steel, so the magnets stick to that and allows me to maybe put parts together and hold them with the magnets in place there while I'm gluing or soldering, especially with soldering, because the solder is not going to flow as easily to steel as it would the different brass or copper that might be used in the wire. So this is good for holding those wires in place while you use the soldering iron. Speaking of soldering, I use this Weller variable temperature soldering iron, and it comes with the holder. And I went out and purchased a fine tip to go on mine aftermarket. The one that came with it's larger tip. So for doing the intricate work on model railroad items, you probably want to go ahead and get the fine tip to go on top of that. This allows you to vary the temperature of the tip, the heat of the tip, so that you can solder different items and not risk melting those things as you're soldering. Especially track, you've got to be very careful when soldering feeder wires or anything like that to your track, because it will melt the plastic ties quite easily. So you want to have an adjustable soldering iron with a fine tip. Alright, to go with our soldering iron, I've got some very fine solder. The smaller solder, the thinner solder like this, I don't know if you can see how thin that is against my finger. You're going to find that that is going to flow and melt a lot easier and a lot quicker. Flow into your solder joints that much faster, so that you're not risking melting stuff. Also a pack of wood toothpicks for a variety of different things. I've noticed that even for painting, I can dip the tip of the toothpick in some paint and use it for just putting very fine dots of rust on some of my models. Also with electrical is a variety pack of different heat shrink tubing. So lots of different sizes, some very small, all the way to some larger pieces there. So you want to have a variety set of that. Micro brushes. You want to have some micro brushes that allow you to paint or glue. These are disposable, so once you get paint or glue on them after you're done with that particular project, you might throw that away. So you buy them in a pack, multi-pack like that. Okay, I keep with me some miniature drills, some very small drills from number 80 all the way up to number 60 typically. I've got a couple of bigger ones than that for tapping some holes, but generally that's what I'm going to use for my detail parts. So I've got lots of different ones. I get these generally from Walthers. Over the years, I found that those just hold up good for me. You can research different brands that you may want to choose from, but I choose the Walthers, and I get lots of different variety of sizes. And then I also have a set that I bought at a train show a while back, and as these have been breaking or I'm losing them, I'm just replacing them with the Walthers one. But that helps to keep them organized in this this item, because the way it's designed, it's got this little hole on the top. As you slide it over into position of the particular bit that you want, then you're able to tilt it over and get that bit out. To go with good drill bits, you're going to have a small hand drill like this, and it's got the collar that undone, so that that particular size, it's got one size on one end, and then you flip it over and it's got a slightly different size on the other, and it inserts back on there, and you bring the collar back down. So there's 4 possible sizes on this drill, because in the bottom unscrews, and then down there is a second bit holder with more sizes on each end of that, so you can just adjust that as you need to be able to fit the different sizes of drill bits that you might be needing for that project. Okay, we're almost done here. We've got just a few more tools left to show you. This here is handy if you're going to be doing a lot of scratch building. This is a caliper. This is a digital caliper. That way it shows you the different increments in a decimal form for knowing how thick a particular scratch building item might be, or the diameter of some tubing or anything like that. So that's something that you want to have if you're going to be doing a lot of scratch building. Alright, this here we've got Northwest Shortline chopper. This is the original chopper. This got the masonite wood base. And so as we pull that out of the box there, you can see this is really handy for scratch building because you've got your different jigs for the different angles that you might want to cut, and as a stop, because you can slide your piece in there, cut it, bring it up, slide it in again, and cut identical pieces over and over and over again. If you're maybe cutting a lot of wood ties for a project, or you're scratch building a bridge and you need just a dozen of the same size piece of plastic as you're building that bridge, or then the different angles. And it's got a standard generic razor blade that you can get at any hardware store, so that if this blade gets dull, then it's just a simple matter of replacing that blade and you're back into cutting business. So chopper is good if you're going to be doing scratch building or things of that nature. This is pretty old. Actually, I've had this saw for going on probably 25 years now, but it's still sharp enough to cut the balsa wood and the plastic styrene that I use for different scratch building and kit bashing projects. So a razor saw, you'll want to consider that, and I do not have it with me, but a miter box to go with this particular razor saw, so you can get your different mitered cuts on your materials that you're cutting. Alright, well, what we have here is the trusty Model Railroaders Dremel 3000. It's a Dremel tool. It's a variable speed Dremel tool from off 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So the maximum RPM on this particular model is 35,000 RPM. You've got the locking button there. It allows you to use the wrench to open the collar, to put in different tools in there. I've got the thicker heavy-duty cutoff wheel for whenever I'm cutting different metals that are a little bit harder than like say track or anything like that. You also want to consider a variety kit of different bits that you can go on there for polishing and for smoothing and for sanding, and there's some other extra cutoff wheels there, and that keeps it all handy. And I would go a step further. If you're going to get a Dremel tool, get the Dremel tool that's got the neck that unscrews there, and you can adapt the flex shaft to that. Because that attaches to your Dremel tool and allows you to use the tip of the flex shaft to put your different cut-off wheels in there, your sanding sticks, your grinders or anything like that, and have a little more control as you're like trying to sand and carve on different things. So that's definitely something you want to consider for your Dremel tool. Alright folks, that's it for this video. I appreciate you watching, and I hope I was able to give you a couple of ideas on some different tools, maybe tools that you've never heard of before. And I've been collecting these tools for a long time. I started out with, just a couple of screwdrivers and some sanding sticks and a couple of X-Acto knives, and I built it up from there. So don't think that you need to run out right from the get-go and get all of these tools all at once. It's okay to build your tool collection a little bit at a time. And having a wider variety of tools at your disposal is going to make your modeling a lot more fun and stress-free. So if you have any comments or suggestions on tools that you've never heard of, or maybe there's tools that I don't have on my workbench that you think maybe I should, leave those in the comments below, and we'll see you guys on the next video. Thanks for watching.